So I was so glad they were frisking our bags and frisking our bodies downstairs, because as I said last year, it's like if there was a bomb that exploded in this conference center right now, crowdsourcing would cease to exist, or at least be on delay for another 10 years. There's a ton of talent in this room. So hopefully I'll go through a few things. We did a survey amongst a number of you, so we've got data. I'm a bit of a data hound, so we're going to share some of that. Hopefully share some takeaways in terms of what you're going to see over the next few days. You're going to have 46 presentations, I think I counted, from people from about 20 different countries. So this is truly a global conference, and I'm sure you're going to be much, much smarter after it than before. I want to take particular interest in just saying to Epi, our conference organizer, congrats again in terms of your passion in bringing this off. This is amazing. For all the reasons you mentioned and many others, this is where we should be today, Singapore. It's the right city. You've got amazing talent. I personally get giddy. A lot of conferences I don't get giddy, but I know there's certain people here that I definitely want to listen to because I've listened to them for a while, and now I get to see their live shtick. So thank you for pulling this all together, and many successes ahead. So these are skylines of 6 different cities. You probably recognize some of them. What's the common link between all 6? Beulah. What is it? Money. Yeah, I guess some of them have money. So you got Singapore, you got Washington, you've got Toronto, San Francisco, Bangalore, and New York. These are the 6 places where people look for crowdsourcing on Google more than any others. So these are the 6 top cities. Not surprisingly, you may think that you had your own free fate for coming here today. We've got speakers from all 6 of those places coming here. I know 2 of my morning brethren here, Brian and Jeremiah from San Francisco. We've got Federico from New York. I think, is Aaron in the audience from India? He might be coming later. We've got all 6 of those represented. I'm from Toronto, so once again, we're the most connected nation in the world. I have to say that every time a Toronto Canadian person speaks. And the real reason is we're cold 5 months of the year. So what else are we going to do, right? So last year, I profiled 4 different examples of crowdsourcing that I probably spotted the week before, or at least on my mind before this conference. There was a really cool video from Light Light. There was our infamous Toronto mayor, Rob Ford. Has everybody heard of Rob Ford over here? Has he traveled over here? Darn, damn. There was some, Gawker was crowdsourcing a video from him. Benjamin Moore had a great crowdsourcing campaign, and Veronica Mars became, I think at the time, one of the biggest crowdsourcing campaigns ever. So love Kristen Bell. So I thought I'd share 4 new examples this year. Anybody heard of this company here? Seeking Alpha? It's kind of stockbrokers, user-generated stockbrokers and stock advice. And apparently an academic actually proved that all the user-generated advice that was coming in as Seeking Alpha was better than the market. So essentially a group of hobbyists, unknown people sending in stock tips and reports were actually performing better than business analysts paid at a considerable amount. So that could be my award for the most disruptive example. Certainly we've all seen this. I think Luke is speaking on this as well later on today, tomorrow. And so 3 million people are part of this odyssey in terms of trying to find the Malaysia plane, certainly bringing this more mainstream. Oculus. Anybody? San Francisco people, were you early investors, were you part? Did you wish you had a piece of this early on? 2 years ago, they had a very humble goal of raising $250,000. And just, last month, Facebook bought them for $2 billion. So there is money to be had through crowdsourcing, through different paths. But Oculus Rift is obviously a virtual reality thing. The thing, has anybody tried this? It looks really clumsy, but I mean, it's $2 billion clumsy, so I'll take those dollars. And then finally, I just thought this was a hard tugger. I don't know if anybody saw this, but 12,000 San Franciscoans came to the wishes of this boy who wanted to play Batman for a day. And I thought, man, even the visual made me want to tear up a little bit. So there is a poignant nature to crowdsourcing as well. So show of hands, because it's interesting. I had the advantage of coming in 2 days before the conference and talking to some of my fellow speakers. We're all a little bit different. This is not like a social media conference where it's kind of like the melting pot and we all swallow the Kool-Aid. We all come from kind of different places. So I'm going to explain 3 different types of people. You have to choose one, okay? I know a lot of you are in marketing and you don't like to choose situations, or you find the novelty in choosing one. I think there's 3 different types of people that get attracted by crowdsourcing. So on the left-hand side, because it makes money. you know what, whether you're an entrepreneur or whether you exist in a corporation, there is a bottom line value to doing this. This is the Wolf of Wall Street approach to crowdsourcing. You know, Gordon Gekko, greed is good. So that's one type of person. This is maybe why you're here today. It produces better results. So Gravity was a movie. What's that? Oh, you're just putting your hand up. We'll vote later. I like the keenness, though. Very good, very good. So it produces better results. It just plain, hey, I'm not wildly ambitious about its potential from making a better world or making money, but we know it produces better answers. So you might be that group of people. Or finally, it creates a better world. So it's like sometimes when you talk to people in the crowd economy, they talking in kind of gushing tones about what this could be and how we could transform the world and how this could be a force for good. So show of hands, and you have to put your hands up, okay? Nobody likes sitting on their hands. Who's a Wolf of Wall Streeter here? Finds crowdsourcing a profitable, interesting venture, it makes money. Hands up. All right, good. Admit it, okay? It feels good, okay? Who's in the other circle of it? It sheerly produces better answers. Okay, and then who is in this is going to create a better world, crowdsourcing. Interesting, see? I count about 40, 40, 20, or 20, 40, 40 on that. So we all kind of come from the different stripes, but we get to the same place. And as we all realize, it does create value. I think that's why we're here. I think we've seen about 10 years of social media conferences and stuff. I think we kind of know what social media does. We're still trying to learn what crowdsourcing does. So we did a report. There's about 150 of you that were kind enough to actually fill the report out. So the data set is what I would call enlightened crowd people. And we asked a lot of questions. And before I get in, has anybody seen the Gartner hype cycle before? Has anybody seen it, the slope of disillusionment followed by eventually you make sense of the technology? Well, last year, crowdsourcing was on the good side of their curve. You know, it was climbing. It was like, wow, there's still progress, still people are excited about it. Now they put it actually a little bit on the other side where I never like to be traveling down any curve. We're on this trough of disillusionment. Who thinks crowdsourcing is kind of like on the way down according to Gartner? Hands up. Of course, we've all swallowed the Kool-Aid. Good, we've got at least some contrarian advice here. I counted about 5 hands there. Certainly, if I look at Google, their evidence would say, wow, there's a lot to grow here. You know, these were barely invented terms back in 2006 and 2008. And if you look at the newspaper headlines over the last 2 years, they're, if anything, going up still. And certainly we also asked you, we said, look, we've seen data that says crowdsourcing is growing at about 90% a year based on some of the crowdfunding stats. Based on that benchmark, will we grow more than that over the next 2 years, same or less? And so certainly the people in this room, the people that answered the survey, are quite bullish about crowdsourcing still growing. I look at that 5.1 billion stat that you put up there and I go, you know what, given a $70 trillion world economy, I think there's a lot of room to grow in terms of what crowds can actually give. So, anybody want to answer this one? Why are we all attracted to being here today? Why are we all attracted to crowd movements in general? Thoughts? Any starters? I like that. Empowers the individual. That may be on that on my answers here. I'm playing Family Feud with you right now, so I don't know if to give you a strike or not yet. More efficient. I love it. So it's more of a rational type of approach. Any other reasons? Transparency. Just throw them out when you got them. Breadth of ideas. Let's see what the top 3 things you told me. We love its disruptive possibilities. I think everybody that's attracted to crowdsourcing are really change agents at the heart of it. You know, it doesn't matter whether you're emotional or rational about it. You want to change the current status quo into something else. So this was the #1 thing you told me in terms of why you're so interested in the space. Crowds connect people with purpose, and I know I was here last year on stage, and I think one of the key distinctions I make between social media and crowdsourcing has a purpose to it. You know, as peeing may have a purpose in your social media slide earlier, it probably does have a purpose actually, but I don't know how noble a purpose it was. So crowdsourcing is all about purpose, which I think is really cool. You get people in this industry that actually really care about something. And then finally, the third reason with it was it keeps us on the leading edge. So you want to be progressive, you want to be ahead, you realize this is a fast-moving world. By leveraging what crowds know or being part of the crowd economy, you can actually stay ahead of the game. So what do we call this crowd thing? Semantics are really important, I find. I work on a lot of projects that are global, and certainly when you deal with multiple languages, semantics can be everything. What are we here? I know we've generically said crowd, and we've called this Crowdsourcing Week. Are there other terms you're more comfortable with than crowdsourcing? Co-creation? Collaborative consumption? Open innovation, crowd economy. I think we had about 13 that had some level of interest that we put in a closed-ended survey. So this is what you came back to us with. You know what? You're kind of a little bit scattered all over the map, but certainly crowdsourcing was the agreed-to term in terms of what the umbrella of this thing is. Crowdfunding second, collective intelligence, open innovation, and peer-to-peer economy. I don't know if that's surprising to you. Certainly there's new terms that we actually threw into the mix that hadn't yet got into the top 5. So yeah, unlike social media, there's a lot of different people that are trying to get into this space. And I think there's kind of, based on the evidence, there's kind of like this permissiveness that says, okay, we're willing to call it all crowdsourcing. But even some people in the open-ended comments on the survey went out of their way to say they never want to see crowdsourcing and crowdfunding in the same kind of explanation or arena, which I found surprising, certainly based on its passion. Are we warring with social media? Do you guys like social media? Who doesn't like social media here? Yeah, that's what I figured. There's probably a few. What's the reason? Just any stress and anxiety? Is it the consequence of being on social media or what it does to you or what? It's 24 hours, nonstop. Certainly is in Singapore. I find one of the things in Singapore being 12 hours away from Toronto, where I'm from, is now I'm in a 24-hour social climate for sure, right? 3 o'clock in the morning, that's prime time back home. Certainly, one of the bemoaning thoughts about social media is in the top 100 Twitterers, there are 3 Kardashian sisters. So if you want to paint a brush in terms of just how shallow Twitter and social media at large is, poor old Chloe over there, despite all of her marital issues, is still hanging in at 77. So so yeah, I mean, I've gone to all these conferences, and there are certain groups of social media people I just want to club because they kind of only live in that space. And so I think crowdsourcing is a little bit different. Certainly, you fed that back to us. You said, you know what, if there's 4 key differences between crowdsourcing and social media, it's this. It's a business model. It's not a media model, which is what social media, at least from the monetizing standpoint, is. It has a motive or a business or a cause motive. On the flip side, social media can be anything. It can be related to your friends. I know a lot of companies try to make money off of it. Innovation versus connection. As Epi mentioned in his introduction, there are 2 distinct end games in terms of doing this, and a monetary outcome versus an engagement outcome. I think at the end of the day, even if we're in a not-for-profit and love crowdsourcing, we recognize there's a monetary gain by doing this. Either you're more efficient or you get more money, versus social media that has an engagement outcome. So what's driving all of our optimism? We said we're going to grow much more than 90%. What do you think's driving it? We threw 15 what we want to call meta trends at you. If you look at nearly every single web startup that's out there, any kind of thing that really takes off, there's about 15 things. I defy most people to look outside of those 15 and say something else is happening here. You guys fed us back in terms of here's the 6 things that really is what makes crowdsourcing go and what's making it grow. Collaboration, obviously, efficiency. We can do more with less. There's a reason I think we're going to Amsterdam in later in the year, just because Europe's kind of, you were in Amsterdam, right? You're going to Brussels. If you look up crowdfunding as a term, the top 6 cities looking at crowdfunding are all European. And so I think Europe's dealt with, what do we do with populations that are actually static, with resources that aren't abundant, and how can we become more efficient? Globalization, experience, innovation, and customization. I want to dip into 3 specific ones. We actually asked, okay, over the last year, you've seen crowdsourcing grow. So forget about the meta trends. What are the specific 3 things that you've seen over the last year that's making you reappraise just how interested you are in crowdsourcing? The first one, the rise of entrepreneurial startup culture. Everybody wants to be a startup person. Certainly, if you're under 30 years old, 60% of them, at least in North America, think they are entrepreneurs, which is quite different than the generation before it, and certainly different than the generation before that. So that was the number 1 reason why people were really getting more interested in crowdsourcing versus the previous year. Second thing, rise of free agents, freelancing, independent contractors. How many people are freelancers here? Or independent consultants, or have no employees working for them, they work for themselves? Okay, so a smattering of hands. This is on the growth, right? And certainly there's a number of reasons. There was 11 reasons given here. There are bad reasons why you are a freelancer. You can't find work or you can't find the right type of work. But generally, 8 out of the top 11 reasons people give are generally positive. So, we should look at this as a good thing. Finally, we're dealing with an expanded marketplace, global marketplace. And you've seen that even over the last year in crowdsourcing. Different big crowdsourcing companies are merging operations or expanding in new geographies. I know 99 Designs actually at our conference last year expanded into Singapore and started to set up an office here. So you're seeing crowdsourcing mature and actually grow into a global force. So we actually asked 25 different parts of the crowdsourcing landscape. So 25 different services, and we said, what's your bet? Over the next 3 years, what do you think is going to grow faster? These were the 5 things that you said were going to grow. And the great thing is everything that's captured here is captured in our conference over the next 3 days as well. All right? So there was the financial gain of crowdfunding and crowd equity in third place. I know Jeremiah is going to talk a lot about the sharing economy and crowd consumption, things like Airbnb. That was second. Crowd services like Elance, Odesk, a whole bunch of other different crowd services where you're tasking out some parts of your business or your life. And then crowd engagement from a not-for-profit cause standpoint. So those are the 5 things that you thought really, if I was to bet, growing further than crowdsourcing, those are the 5. And then probably more importantly, we said, which industries are going to be most affected by change? So we put 25 industries up there and we said, who over the next 3 years you think are really going to be reinvented or be affected by crowdsourcing? Not too sure if you're surprised by some of these. Maybe part of the reason why a lot of finance companies are really interested in actually getting to know Epi and some of the stuff he's doing is finance and banking is number 1 on that list, which can be scary for a lot of traditional bankers. Certainly I know from my Canadian experience, new regulations, new ways of doing business, and cutting potentially the middleman out. It's a bit of a scary thing to be in terms of where a banker is. Not-for-profits, technology, art and design, and publishing. I did put 5 other industries up there because I think they're important, and my guess would be if we're here 3 years from now, certainly things like healthcare, education may end up showing top 5 on this list as well. So there's a lot of wealth here that's going to actually be changed by crowdsourcing affecting them. Any Walking Dead fans? Does it air here? I hope it does. It's such a good show. Anyway, somebody's got to lead. Depending on which episode this year, there's been different leaders, which is a little disconcerting for me as a fan. I like the sheriff leading here. But why do we crowdsource? So I want to get into at least a few different slides in terms of actually managing and leading campaigns on crowdsourcing. The top 6 objectives people gave for crowdsourcing. So these are the reasons why people are saying, hey, I'm launching a crowdsourcing initiative. I think probably it's been consistent for the last 5 or 6 years. It solves problems. You know what? As we mentioned earlier, or at least some people mentioned earlier, this is a great way of solving your problems. And I suspect that was large by a very healthy amount. Other reasons, it funds new ideas and also validates new ideas. So companies are increasingly using these forms to actually not only fund new ideas, but importantly to actually figure out which ones they should chase. It identifies insight. It delivers awareness and publicity. It launches a product. So most of crowdsourcing, you think about Pebble Watch, a whole bunch of other types of hardware-based crowdsource launches. You've got a pre-validated kind of customer list already through your crowdsourcing. So you're not only financed by crowdsourcing, but you're actually creating a customer list and hopefully a referral list as well. And then finally, it creates breakthrough innovation. So those are the 6 reasons why people told us they were launching crowdsourcing efforts. Top 7 ingredients of crowdsourcing sauce. So what are the 7 things to really get right? Who has not yet done a crowdsourcing campaign but is about to do one? Hands up. Or is considering it. Are we all experts here? Are we all in this game for a number of years? Who are you people? Why are you here? All right, well then maybe you'll know the answers here in terms of the top 7 reasons. The great thing about this, certainly as a marketer, is more than any other factor, it's having a crowd-worthy, simple, interesting idea that people are going to latch onto. And if you think about it in your own world, think about the top 3 crowdsourcing campaigns you've ever heard of. It's probably because at the heart of it, they had a really neat, simple, social, shareable type of idea. Second reason, triggers and incentives. People don't do stuff for nothing. They want to be motivated. That could be an intrinsic motivation, extrinsic, or getting something at the end of the day. Number 3, a great product. I'll share with you some examples of that. The tools, a lot of you people are part of platforms, some type of platforms or open-ended platforms. They are important. People said that was number 4. The quality of members who participate in a strong network, I can't stress this more. There was a research that came out last month that said on certain platforms, half your money's made on the first day, right? And then you wait for the next 89 days to see if you can dribble enough stuff in to achieve your goal. Half your stuff's on the first day, which implies that you've already built up a network of fans and people that love you already, that it's not like you're going to grow to love somebody over a 90-day crowdsourcing campaign. You really want to have your network in place early on. And then finally, I can speak as a person from P&G and Molson and big corporations. One of the big challenges, how do you actually make this stuff work once you've defined a solution and actually have this work inside a very, very large company? It's not as easy as you think. So those are the 7 different success factors. Some great examples in terms of just an idea that was so simple. People seen TaskRabbit before? I mean, I've never used the service, so I can't account for whether it delivers on my need, but certainly, it's a quite explicit, simple idea. Tasks suck, we get them done easy through the crowd. Love it. Another idea, I love Kiva, because Kiva drives 3 different incentives. I love telling people I donate to Kiva. It makes me feel like a good person. I love the fact that somebody receives the benefit of my investment somewhere in the world. And I love the fact that I can get a return on this too. So if I'm looking as a person at their wallet, certainly I can get a return on Kiva as well. And then finally, I talked about great products. If you looked at the top 4 products ever in Kickstarter's campaign, I could argue at least 3 of them. And since I'm such a Kristen Bell fan, I'm going to say the Veronica Mars movie was also a great product. So all 4 of them have a great product that has some core insight at the basis of it. All right. So you guys are all in the crowd business. It's not as simple as we think, right? I see sometimes blog posts that make crowdsourcing seem so damn simple, and I know the blood, sweat, and tears that go into it. What are the top impasses people say in terms of managing or leading crowdfunding campaigns? Any thoughts? Yep. Say it again? Effective recruitment, absolutely. Yeah. What about the actual management of stuff, like, being in a big organization, or at least even in a 15-person organization, trying to get other people to come along with you? What are some of the challenges there? Any thoughts? Yeah? Totally. That's definitely one of them. So I'll do the Family Feud. Yeah, you just got a check mark there. Here are the top few. Legal and regulatory. Certainly in the US, the Jobs Act came out. I think nearly every single country that I looked at has some type of legal or regulatory discussion going on about crowdsourcing, whether it's financial rules, whether it's who owns the property. There was the Oculus Rift thing that I just showed you. There's a number of people that initially invested in the campaign that are really, really pissed off. They're like, you know what? We invested in this. We were your friends. We were like the grassroots. And then you sold out to Facebook. How could you, right? So there's a lot of different things that even might not be legal, regulatory, but certainly cross the ethical bounds as well. Time for staff to manage it, right? This is tough stuff. Am I right? Crowdsourcing isn't easy, is it? Because there is a lot of people on stage that I've looked at and they make it look easy. There's a lot of things involved. Having 8 steps here probably does an injustice to how difficult and how many steps are actually involved in crowdsourcing. I can't think of another thing that you could do to a company that is more open, that has more constituent stakeholders, that has more steps involved, and more hurdles to come over in terms of getting people on your side. So second hurdle, time for staff to manage it. And third, organizational silos. You said it, right? Certainly in big organizations. It's interesting who's getting to lead crowdsourcing now. We looked at just kind of a brushstroke in terms of who actually gets to lead crowdsourcing. And strangely, I actually thought it was really high. About 50% of people said, you know what, crowdsourcing is a decision still made by the executive. So it's your CEO or the executive board in terms of a company actually wanting to do something. I would have thought marketing would have been higher. I would have thought innovation departments would have been higher. But it's really actually at a very high level these decisions are being made. Okay, storm clouds ahead. What are we really worried about? How could this all go sour? And next year we won't have a conference because crowdsourcing has not lived up to our expectations. Wouldn't that be sad? Any reasons? I'll share them with you. Intellectual property rights, people are worried about, hey, who owns all this stuff after it's produced? Now that we get more mature and the people that actually contribute to our campaigns get more mature, how does that all figure in? Weaker participants, I've been hearing that a lot. I don't know, for people that manage platforms, are your participants less zealous about contributing now than they were 2 years ago? No? They're just as passionate? And is it because you're doing something to intervene, or is it, tell me more.
I mean, if you do more for them, they get more passionate. If you do less, they get less. I think the bigger risk is if you do less for them.
Yeah. I mean, I think regardless of who you are, though, and I've seen stats in terms of social media as well, consumers, customers, fans, evangelists, advocates, they're less and less inclined to actually share stuff or do stuff on your behalf unless there is something much more involved for them than there was maybe 2 or 3 years ago. 2 or 3 years ago, they might have been doing it for novelty reasons. Now there is more of a contract that you need to establish with who's ever in your campaigns. Regulatory, we've talked about. Opportunity for scandal, Bitcoin, right? Anybody run a Bitcoin exchange here? There's a guy going down in Phoenix somewhere. Yes? Excellent. And you're still floating, you're still solvent? That's right. If I was a Bitcoin holder, I would be looking at my phone all day, I guess. But there is a promise. I mean, certainly we asked one of the questions, will Bitcoin rival national currencies 3 years from now? And about 30% of you are willing to make that bet. That, you know, we'll assume it's just the same as a euro or a krona or what have you. And then management time is excessive. So what are the things that we really agree on? So I'll do a few more slides and then introduce Jeremiah for the day. 4 things that we really, really agree on. You know, I remember the Deputy Minister of Philippines last year on the stage was talking about, wow, we do such good stuff. One of the biggest challenges we have is everybody wants to give us their best ideas in the Philippines, and we absolutely have no way to curate and find the best ones. So it's almost like this fire hose of insight and no way to actually get to the right ones. Number 2 and 4, large corporations will start getting massively involved and banks will start getting massively involved. And when those 2 things happen, this becomes a much more mature kind of sector. And then finally, higher standards of business governance need to actually take place to make this stuff work and be credible to outside people as well. All right, what do you think the things are we're just kind of torn on? There was 2 or 3 items, I think, that we just said, you know what, I'm not too sure about this. We're almost half split. Developing world countries will do this and grow this better than developed world countries. It's kind of like a little bit in favor of developing world countries. That would be my bet, but certainly, you know, 49 to 35, it wasn't a slam, or 31 wasn't a slam dunk. We don't all think that we're going to put angel investors out of business. There's a certain chunk of us that do, but we're a little bit split on that. And to my point earlier, contributor fatigue will kill the enthusiasm for future growth and crowdfunding. A little bit of a split on that as well. All right. And then finally, I think she's given the F-bomb or the finger there. One thing that we certainly didn't agree on, crowdsourcing is nearing its heightened popularity as a term and will be considered more of a fad in the future. And maybe I was dealing with an audience that already didn't want to answer this in the other straight, but I think we're quite buoyant. Are we all kind of excited about where crowdsourcing is going? Or are we getting more rational about it? Yeah? Excited? Who's really excited? Okay, who's like tepidly, interestedly excited? Who's like naysayingly about to go on to the other side of the fence and move to the next thing? Okay, so we're all somewhere like, my point scoring system says that's about an 8 out of 10. We did say, we put 50 companies up there and said, who is in your Hall of Fame? We said, based on the weight of everything that you've seen over the full course of time, and so maybe we should establish some venue or something where there's a crowdsourcing Hall of Fame in Singapore that people go to and worship these brands. But these are the 3 ones that you guys said. So Kickstarter, Wikipedia, Airbnb, they're now in the Hall of Fame. We'll develop those plaques, and next year we'll enter 3 more kind of entrants into that campaign. So I've got some key takeaways for the next 3 days. It's going to be long. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be fun. You know, tap into all of it. I'm finding a lot of times at this conference last year, some of the best things were not only the presentations on stage, but the conversations that you have in between. So certainly leverage that. You've got opportunity here. I've got 5 things. 1, the world is a blur. Things are happening so quickly. Do you know that selfie wasn't even a term 18 months ago? Think about how much we use that now, right? I just did one before going on stage with Brian, right? The world is getting smaller. You know, you look at all these people merging operations. You know, you will have crowdsourcing entities that exist around the world. You, principally a lot of you being in Asia, How are you going to react to that? Are you going to ally with people? Are you going to sell yourself to whoever the larger person is? Are you going to expand yourself into a different geography? Crowdsourcing is growing up. I think that's the theme of this conference. Last year, we were all in a little bit of learning mode. I think this year, there is real live examples of impact being created. So crowdsourcing is a thing. It's commercializing itself. It's interesting. Best practicing are starting to develop, meaningful impact. And someone, I don't know if this was in our notes heading into the conference, but certainly I talked to enough people last night that know a lot about crowdsourcing. And one of the things we kept on coming back to is, even though the crowd loves to be involved and loves to have democratic decisions happen, somebody needs to lead these crowds. So who's it going to be? Is it going to be you? Is it going to be somebody else? Somebody going to take your shorts away by the fact that they were smarter or faster or more nimble in terms of actually doing stuff with crowdsourcing? Hopefully not after the next 3 days. And so the research survey that we did, you can still participate in it. Certainly I tweeted it through Hootsuite, so I think I pre-scheduled it at right around this time. So it's on the CSW Global 14 handle. We will launch the full thought paper in anticipation of the European thing that crowdsourcing is going to. And if I grab you for a coffee conversation, I'll want to ask you 6 questions about things that I probably don't know yet about this. So I would love to actually have the conversation with you if you've got some good pearls of wisdom to contribute. And there was one thing in the survey. There's a need for a centralized forum for sharing learnings and best practices of crowdsourcing, which one example of this is this event. You know what? There is truly no other global event on crowdsourcing around the world. Okay? Hopefully that's what we're doing today. 77% of you strongly agree with that statement. I'll tease this out a little bit in true marketing ease. We're also launching something at this conference called CSW2. I won't get into it deeply, but it certainly reflects, I think Epi's going to mention something about it this afternoon. It reflects, I think, a need that certainly Epi and his team feel in terms of the number of governments, the number of not-for-profits and businesses that come to them out of the blue and not knowing what questions to ask, never mind who has the best solution. So we're going to try to launch a solution here at this conference that maybe makes that process a little bit easier, and we're inviting you to actually participate in that. So with no further ado, there's a guy that's been doing this all over Singapore the last couple of days, doing his little Jeremiah hands. We're trying to start a little trend. We're trying to be trending on Jeremiah hands. So I don't know. He'll explain to you later what that actually means. But Jeremiah is probably, if not the most, certainly one of the luminaries in the sharing economy crowdsourcing space. I've known him for the last 10 years. It's interesting. It takes a conference like this for us to actually meet each other live, face-to-face. We've been able to spend the last day together, and he's one of the good guys of the business. It's not only he's got great content, but he's actually a great community builder. Anybody that talks about Jeremiah always says, you know what, his stuff is great. And I like him as a person as well, and I think you will too. He was at Hitachi, I think, for a number of years. He worked for about 3 or 4 years at Altimeter, doing a lot of engaged economy stuff. And certainly in talking to him, he has embraced wholeheartedly crowdsourcing and the sharing economy, as he calls it. I think personally he crowdsources everything. Every single piece of clothes that you see on him today will have been crowdsourced. Every single one. He'll explain more in terms of how pervasive this is. And yeah. Oh, there he is. I was thinking you were still up there, actually. I was going, this guy up there wasn't even reacting. So you've got a doppelganger up there. But anyway, with no further ado, I will have Jeremiah come out. He's got a great new company called Crowd Companies as well that he'll probably explain what that's all about as well. So